The moment the alien ship's docking clamps engaged, the metal hissed, a sound of ancient power mingling with the cold vacuum of space. On the ground below, Captain Elian Vorek's sharp eyes watched through the misted glass of the command center. The aliens were coming, their sleek ships shimmering like predators in the dark, the earthbound winds rising to meet them. "Keep them steady," Vorek's voice cut through the air, calm yet taut. His fingers slid across the console, tracing familiar paths in the labyrinth of humanity's defenses. He was not here to merely observe. He was here to guide, no, to protect Earth from the unknown forces lurking just beneath their feet. He breathed in the cool, metallic scent of the command room, sweat, iron, and dust, a stark contrast to the crisp morning air that would soon greet the visitors. But there was something else, too, something more primal and raw. A subtle electric charge buzzed through the air, a tension that hummed against the bones. Earth was waking up, preparing for its inevitable clash with the unknown. Out in the distance, a heavy shadow loomed. The alien students had arrived. Their mission, to learn about Earth, a planet they had written off as insignificant, its people, its nature, all a footnote in the galaxy's history. As far as they were concerned, Earth was an outdated curiosity, a relic of a forgotten era. They were wrong, and Vorek intended to show them just how wrong they were. The doors of the transport pod slammed open with a mechanical clang. First, a rush of wind, dry, almost biting, as the alien students stepped onto the surface of Earth for the first time. Their sleek uniforms, smooth and rigid in their design, seemed out of place against the rugged terrain of the landscape. Arkin, their leader, stepped forward, eyes narrowed, the gleaming silver of his gaze darting over the unfamiliar terrain. "Welcome to Earth," Vorek's voice echoed, calm but carrying an unmistakable weight. He watched the students carefully, seeing the slightest twitch of discomfort in their postures. They were not as brave as they believed. Arkin, the young alien commander, squared his shoulders, his voice tinged with authority and disdain. "We've been prepared for this," he said, brushing his fingers across the soft, grainy dirt that lay in stark contrast to the metallic perfection of their ships. "I trust Earth's threats will be manageable?" Vorek didn't flinch. "You'll find that the threats here are not just physical." His gaze swept across the horizon, where the early morning sunlight painted the sky with orange and violet hues. They're woven into the land, the sky, and the very air you breathe. The students, unfamiliar with the unrelenting Earth atmosphere, stumbled slightly as the gravity pulled at them in ways their bodies weren't accustomed to. Arkin's gaze flickered, noticing how some of his crew staggered. "This gravity," he began, before cutting himself off, his posture stiffening. Vorek chuckled softly, a sound like the crack of stone. "Yes, Earth's gravity will weigh you down. But that's nothing compared to what the planet holds inside." The air was different here, rich with moisture and the scent of pine, filling the lungs with every breath. The alien students, accustomed to sterile, lifeless atmospheres, looked momentarily unsettled. Their enhanced senses picked up every detail, every scent that felt so alien, so thick with life. They recoiled instinctively as the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves hit them. They were not in a controlled laboratory anymore. They were in the wild, Earth's wild. Vorek took a step forward, his boots grinding into the rocky earth. "Get used to it," he said, his voice an even whisper that cut through the quiet tension. "It's not just the gravity you'll have to conquer." Arkin nodded stiffly, motioning for the group to continue their walk. As the students moved forward, the sounds of their steps crunching on the dirt created a steady rhythm in the air. But the deeper they ventured into the land, the louder the world became. Insects hummed, birds screeched overhead. The distant crash of waves on the shore mingled with the powerful gusts of wind, a song only Earth could compose. One student, his skin a translucent blue that shimmered like ice, recoiled at the touch of the wind on his face. He rubbed his temples, discomfort creeping into his eyes. "This place," he muttered, his voice strained. "It feels alive. Too alive." Vorek's eyes narrowed. This planet thrives in ways your empire can't even begin to understand. A sudden crack pierced the air, a violent shuddering quake that made the ground vibrate beneath them. Arkin and his students froze. The earth beneath their feet groaned, as if angry at the very idea of being controlled. For a moment all was still except for the deep rumble that seemed to come from the very bones of the planet itself. "What was that?" Arkin demanded, his voice more urgent now. Vorek's eyes were already scanning the horizon, watching the tremors ripple through the soil. The ground was never still on Earth. It was an ancient battleground, still simmering with the power of eons. He watched, impassive, as the students tried to regain their composure. "An earthquake," Vorek said simply, his voice steady, betraying no emotion. "One of many." Arkin blinked, taken aback. It just shifted like that?" "Yes," Vorek replied, his words quiet but sharp. "And it will again. The planet is unpredictable. Earth doesn't bow to your schedules, your orders, your power. It moves to its own rhythm. Adapt or fail." The air around them shifted again, a breeze sweeping through the trees and rustling the dry leaves. The land was not just alive, it was untamed, wild. The students could feel it now, the thick tension in the atmosphere, the weight of an ancient, untouched world that wasn't interested in what they had planned for it. For the first time since they arrived, the alien students understood that Earth was not merely a relic, it was a beast, and they were trespassers. Vorek didn't need to say more. The tension in the air was enough. They had come to study Earth. But Earth had its own lessons for them to learn, and some lessons were learned only through pain. "Follow me," Vorek ordered, motioning for them to continue. "We've only just begun." With a reluctant nod, the students followed him, their eyes wide, hearts uncertain. The ground beneath them continued to rumble softly, as if the planet itself was watching, waiting for them to take the next step. The lesson had begun, and Earth always taught its students the hardest lessons. "Keep moving," Vorek commanded, his tone unyielding, but not unkind. He watched the alien students trail behind him, their eyes darting around the unfamiliar landscape, their bodies adjusting to Earth's gravity as though they were learning to walk again. The ground beneath their boots felt almost too solid, the planet's weight pressing against them with every step. It was a weight they hadn't expected, but Earth had long mastered the art of imposing its will. The wind, sharp and dry, bit at their faces, making their alien skin twitch. It wasn't the kind of breeze they were used to. No, this was something more primal, more biting. The air smelled of rich earth and the sweet rot of fallen leaves. The trees around them creaked, their limbs groaning in the weight of time. Something deeper, something ancient, moved within these forests. It was a reminder, Earth was not made for the faint of heart. One of the students, his name barely memorable, Karen, if Vorek recalled, looked down at his boots, the dust of Earth sticking to the soles. This isn't what I imagined," he muttered, wiping his brow. "We were told to expect a dead planet." Vorek's gaze flickered to the young alien, then to the horizon. He could see the discomfort creeping into their expressions, a shared unease that he did not dismiss. "You were told wrong," he replied, his voice low and unyielding. "Earth isn't dead. Not in the way you think." The sharp crack of a branch breaking drew his attention, and instinctively, his hand reached for the old weapon strapped to his side. His senses sharpened. The air suddenly felt charged, as though it too was holding its breath, waiting for something bigger. He motioned for the students to stop. "Stay close," Vorek warned, his voice a whisper in the wind, though it carried the weight of a command. "Something's not right." The group tensed, eyes flickering around, scanning the dense foliage. The temperature dropped, subtly but noticeably, and the silence that followed felt almost oppressive. The wind died, and the trees, those ancient sentinels, stood still as statues. And then it came. A deep, guttural growl rumbled from the trees, a sound that vibrated through the soil beneath their feet. It was as if the very ground itself was alive and angry. Vorek's hand snapped to his weapon, an old but reliable model. The students instinctively took a step back, eyes wide, their own weapons, sleek and unfamiliar, felt strangely inadequate in this raw, unforgiving environment. Vorek's jaw tightened. He had seen creatures like this before. Earth's predators weren't afraid of anything. They were born of the planet's chaos, its unrelenting drive to survive. And now, it seemed, Earth was testing these aliens in a way they hadn't anticipated. A massive shape, dark, almost shifting between the shadows, lunged from the thicket, its eyes glowing a fierce yellow. Its body was all muscle and claws, skin covered in rough scales that gleamed under the weak sunlight filtering through the trees. The alien students froze. It was far too fast, too vicious for them to react. Vorek, however, had no time for hesitation. With a single movement, he unholstered his weapon, took a knee, and fired. The shot echoed through the trees, sharp and final, hitting the creature directly in the chest. It fell with a sickening thud. The forest suddenly plunged back into stillness. The alien student stood motionless, eyes wide as the creature's blood seeped into the soil, a stark contrast to the vibrant green of the leaves surrounding them. "That," Vorek said, standing slowly and surveying the carnage, "is Earth's lesson to you. Nothing here is guaranteed. Not your survival, not your strength. Earth gives nothing freely." Arkan stepped forward, his face pale, his hands trembling. What is that thing? We didn't expect this." His voice faltered, something foreign seeping into his usually confident tone. Vorek wiped the sweat from his brow, still scanning the area for any signs of more movement. "That," he said flatly, "is a creature that survived longer than your empire. A predator born of Earth's chaos and its will to survive. It won't stop. None of Earth's creatures will. You might think your technology gives you an edge, but here it's just another tool, no different than a stone in the hand of an ancient man." Arkan's jaw clenched. "We are not afraid of some—" He stopped, as though the words had become too heavy to finish. Vorek did not look at him as he wiped the blood off his weapon, keeping his eyes fixed on the horizon. He knew the truth had already begun to settle in. "Then you will learn," Vorek said, his voice steady as the wind began to pick up again, "that you're not the strongest force in this galaxy. Not here." The group continued forward, the sound of their footsteps heavy in the silence that followed the attack. The mood had shifted. The arrogance that had once defined the students' every move now weighed them down, like the gravity they hadn't anticipated. Every step forward felt like a step deeper into a world that didn't care about their power or their technology. As they trudged onward, a sudden crack of thunder echoed in the distance, sending a chill through the group. The skies darkened, and the air shifted again. Earth had more to show them, more to test them on. It was a living planet, unpredictable and unforgiving. The alien students, who had arrived with high hopes of conquering this insignificant world, were beginning to realize that they were not the ones in control. And Earth, ancient and unpredictable, was holding nothing back. The trees swayed and groaned as the wind howled through their branches, and Vorek paused for a moment, his gaze narrowing at the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. "This is only the beginning," he muttered to himself. His instincts told him that something much darker than just a predator was stirring beneath the surface. The students, meanwhile, were learning that Earth had no interest in coddling them, no time for their advanced technologies or arrogance. They would have to fight to survive in a world that had no mercy, and even their best weapons might not be enough. Vorek continued forward, eyes scanning for threats, while the students, their faces now tinged with uncertainty, followed hesitantly in his wake. The lesson was far from over, and Earth had no intention of giving up its secrets easily. The wind picked up again, tugging at their clothes and making the trees above groan under the weight of the coming storm. Vorek's eyes scanned the sky, his instincts sharp as ever. He didn't trust Earth's calm for long. It was too quiet, too heavy, like the moment before a lightning strike. The students trailed behind, clearly unsettled by the wilderness around them, the sharpness of their surroundings pressing in from all sides. "Keep moving," Vorek commanded, not looking back. He could sense the discomfort creeping into his students' bodies, the way their movements had slowed since the creature's attack. The shock was still fresh in their minds. He knew they were beginning to question everything they had been told about this planet. Good. They needed to. The forest thickened as they moved deeper, the trees closing in around them like silent sentinels. The earth beneath their boots softened, as though the ground itself were breathing, shifting with each step they took. The air grew heavier, saturated with the sharp tang of wet moss and the earthy smell of decaying wood. Every breath felt thick with the weight of life around them, alive in ways they couldn't yet understand. "Do you feel it?" Karen whispered, his voice trembling with a mix of awe and fear. He looked to his comrades, his eyes wide. "This place, it's not just Earth, it's alive." Vorak didn't stop to answer him. He had long ago learned to ignore the unease that came with the unknown. Earth was the ultimate survivor, and that made it unpredictable, dangerous, but also infinitely powerful. The moment they landed, he knew they'd be tested. Now it was only a matter of how far they were willing to go to understand what Earth truly was. They passed through a thicket of overgrown vines and thorny bushes, the air growing thicker with the scent of wild, untamed life. Vorak kept his eyes sharp. He knew the terrain better than any of them. The alien students may have been bred for strength, intellect, and technology, but they would need more than that here. They needed to trust their instincts, or fail. The silence was broken by the crackling of a distant fire, the low, comforting roar of it cutting through the stillness like an old friend. Vorak didn't flinch. He knew exactly where they were. He had brought them to a secret site, hidden deep within Earth's wilderness, a place long abandoned, but still humming with the power of a forgotten era. Earth's past had a way of resurfacing when it was least expected, and now it was time for the students to see what humanity was truly capable of. "We're almost there," Vorak said, his voice quieter now, as if to preserve the moment. "Stay alert." Arkin, the young alien leader, stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "This is a military site?" His voice was filled with skepticism, though there was a trace of awe hidden beneath his words. Vorak didn't answer immediately. He simply nodded and led them to a clearing. At the center of it, obscured by overgrown trees and foliage, lay the remnants of something monumental, an ancient hangar, half buried by the weight of time, its doors long rusted shut. The metal was pocked and scarred, as though it had been through battles Vorak couldn't even imagine. The remnants of Earth's former might were hidden here, buried beneath layers of nature, forgotten, and left to rot. But not for long. "Here it is," Vorak said, finally allowing the students to see what lay beyond the dense forest. They stared, mouths agape. The hangar was a relic, but its presence was a statement. It was as if Earth had hidden its true strength just out of reach. Arkin stepped forward, a mixture of disbelief and curiosity etched into his features. "What is this place?" Vorak's gaze hardened. "This is one of Earth's most powerful secrets, an arsenal, long forgotten. It was once a symbol of humanity's potential, and now it's yours to explore." A heavy silence fell over them as the students took in the sight before them. The massive hangar loomed like an ancient beast, its surface weathered and scarred, as though it had been waiting for this moment for centuries. Vorak's fingers grazed the side of the hangar's exterior, feeling the cold, solid surface. It was a reminder. Earth had always had more to give. The question was whether these students and their empire were ready to accept it. He stepped aside, motioning for them to enter. Arkin's eyes narrowed, but his curiosity won out. He led his students forward, the door creaking open with an eerie groan as if it were reluctant to be disturbed. The air inside was thick with the smell of rust, oil, and something older, something heavier. Vorak stayed back, watching as the alien students stepped inside. The scent of history clung to the air like a second skin, one that hadn't been disturbed in centuries. The hangar was filled with rows upon rows of old machines, sleek, dark ships that looked as if they could tear through the heavens. Black ships, the most powerful relics of humanity's forgotten age. One of the students, his voice low with disbelief, took a hesitant step forward, brushing a hand over one of the ships. These are ancient. How did Earth—" His words trailed off. Vorak didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked past them, toward a massive control panel that sat at the heart of the hangar. He had no time for explanations. The students needed to understand, but they needed to see it for themselves. These ships, Vorex said, his voice carrying the weight of years of battle, were designed to fight, to survive, and to conquer. Earth's greatest minds built them in secret, knowing that the day would come when they would be needed. His eyes gleamed with something dangerous. That day is now. A moment of silence passed, but it was quickly interrupted by a sound, soft at first but unmistakable. A low hum, reverberating through the air. The lights above flickered to life, one by one, as if the hangar itself was waking up from a long slumber. The alien students took a step back, eyes wide with a mix of fear and awe. This is impossible, Arkin muttered under his breath. How could Earth have hidden something like this from us? Vorex didn't answer. He didn't need to. The truth was standing before them, staring them in the face, and they were finally beginning to understand. This is only the beginning, Vorex said, his voice barely more than a whisper now, though it carried the weight of 1,000 battles fought and won. If you're ready, then you will see just how much Earth has to offer. But be warned, not all lessons are learned in the classroom. And with that, the engines of the black ships roared to life, their power surging through the hangar like a heartbeat. Vorex's eyes never left the students as they stood frozen, staring in awe at the ships that had once been humanity's hidden weapon. You wanted to learn about Earth, he said, stepping back into the shadows of the hangar. Well, now you will. The air in the hangar felt colder now, heavier somehow, as the faint vibration of the ship's engines reverberated beneath their feet. The moment they ignited, the room seemed to shudder as if Earth's forgotten power had been awakened from a long, dormant sleep. Vorex stood in the shadows, watching his students with a detached satisfaction, his breath steady as their faces shifted between disbelief and wonder. They had come here seeking knowledge, but they hadn't understood the cost. Arkin, the young alien commander, was the first to speak. His voice, once full of certainty, now carried a tremor. This cannot be real, he whispered, his fingers brushing the sleek black hull of the ship, as if he feared it might disappear under his touch. The ship loomed above them, silent, but its presence filled the entire room, an ominous reminder of what Earth had once been capable of. Vorex's gaze never wavered. It's very real, he said, stepping forward into the dim light of the hangar. And you're about to learn just how real it can be. Arkin's eyes snapped to Vorex, searching his face for any sign of mockery. There was none. Vorex's face remained an impassive mask, his voice calm but heavy with intent. If you're here to study Earth's history, then you're in the right place. But be warned, what you discover today will change everything. The students exchanged uneasy glances, their initial excitement now tempered with doubt. Karen, who had been uncharacteristically silent, spoke up, his voice edged with uncertainty. How could Earth have hidden this from the galaxy for so long? These ships, they're unlike anything we've seen. No records, no evidence, just silence. Vorex allowed a small, knowing smile to tug at the corner of his lips. Silence is the perfect hiding place, he said. Earth didn't need to show the galaxy what it had. It simply waited, and now Earth is no longer willing to wait. The low rumble of the black ship's engines grew louder as Vorex continued, each word carrying a weight that seemed to press down on the students. For years, Earth has been a quiet observer, biding its time, while the galaxy around it burned. Humanity never asked to be a part of your empire's war, but now you've stepped onto this world. And you'll learn in your own time that Earth's silence is the most dangerous weapon of all. Karen flinched, his gaze flickering to the massive ships. His fingers trembled slightly as he reached for his communicator, his confidence wavering. We need to report this, he muttered, though the words held no real authority. Vorex turned sharply to face him, his eyes cold. You think the galaxy will care? He asked, his voice like ice. Do you think the Empire will send reinforcements to help you when the storm hits? This is not a fight you can report to your commanders. This is Earth's fight. And if you think you can survive it just by calling for help, you're gravely mistaken. The words stung, but they were true. Vorik had lived through too many battles where survival depended not on the strength of your weapons, but on the depth of your resolve. He wasn't going to sugarcoat the reality for them. This was about more than just ships and technology. It was about understanding the raw, untamed will of a planet that had fought its own battles for millennia. Arkin straightened, his gaze hardening. "Then show us," he demanded, his voice steely despite the apprehension in his posture. "If Earth's weapons are so formidable, why not show us how to use them?" Vorek's lips curled into a small, sardonic smile. "Oh, you'll learn soon enough," he replied, stepping toward the control panel at the center of the hangar. His fingers moved swiftly across the interface, activating a series of long-forgotten systems. The walls of the hangar shuddered, the faint hum of machinery filling the space as the lights flickered and brightened. The students watched in a mix of awe and fear as a massive door at the far end of the hangar slowly began to open. The low creak of the old metal grinding against itself echoed throughout the space, the sound unsettling in its magnitude. It was as if the Earth itself was waking up, pulling back a veil that had hidden its true power for too long. As the door slid open, the students' breath caught. Beyond the threshold was a weapons array unlike anything they had imagined. Dozens of sleek, dark cannons lined the walls, their surfaces gleaming with a polished menace. Some of them were massive, capable of devastating entire fleets. Others were smaller, more specialized, each built for a different purpose, but all of them were deadly. Vorik stepped aside, gesturing toward the arsenal. "Humanity's forgotten arsenal," he said quietly. "Weapons capable of leveling worlds, each designed and forged by Earth's greatest minds. Some of these machines have not seen the light of day for centuries. Others are newly reactivated." The alien students moved forward cautiously, their feet crunching on the cold floor beneath them. Each step was deliberate, their eyes scanning the powerful array before them, as if trying to comprehend the magnitude of what stood in front of them. Arkin took a step forward, his hand hovering just above one of the massive cannons. This is impossible," he murmured, his voice filled with awe. "How could we have missed something like this? How did Earth remain hidden for so long?" Vorek's gaze flicked over the students, his expression unreadable. "Because your empire underestimated us," he said, his words sharp as a blade. "You thought Earth was weak. You thought humanity was irrelevant. But you were wrong." There was a pause, thick with tension. Karen, still trying to make sense of it all, stepped forward hesitantly. "And now? What happens now?" Vorik met his gaze, his voice colder than the air around them. "Now, you learn that Earth is not a planet to be toyed with. You've seen our weapons, but you haven't seen the heart of what makes us strong. You haven't seen the true cost of discovery." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled again, a low rumble vibrating through the hangar floor. The walls seemed to flex and groan, as if the planet itself was reacting to their presence. Vorek's eyes hardened, his hand instinctively reaching for his weapon. He didn't speak, but the tension in the air was thick. Something was coming. The lights flickered once more, the distant rumble growing louder. The students stiffened, their senses heightened, the dread of an unknown enemy creeping up their spines. Vorek's voice cut through the growing chaos. "It begins now." And in that moment, as the ground beneath them began to shake more violently, they understood. The true lesson was about to start, and it would cost them more than they ever imagined. The door behind them slammed shut with a deafening clang, and Earth's wrath was unleashed. The tremor in the ground grew violent, a low, relentless thrum that vibrated through the walls of the hangar. The flickering lights overhead seemed to pulse with the same intensity, casting long, sharp shadows across the metallic floor. Vorek's gaze never wavered from the door, his breath shallow as his fingers flexed around the grip of his weapon. The tremor was not just the planet shifting beneath them, it was something else, something far worse. The alien students were frozen, their faces pale in the dim light. Their eyes darted around the room, searching for the source of the disturbance, but Vorek's focus remained singular. He had trained for moments like this, where everything converged at once, where the pressure would bear down and break the weak. "Move!" Vorik barked, snapping his fingers toward the exit. "Now!" The students hesitated for a moment, but urgency overpowered their doubt. They scrambled toward the door, their boots echoing off the hard concrete as they made their way into the cold air outside. The ground underfoot was slick with the remnants of the storm that had just passed, and a gust of wind stung their skin, carrying with it the scent of burning vegetation and the faint sharpness of something metallic. The sky above them had darkened to an almost unnatural black, thick clouds swirling in a vortex, as if they too were caught in the grip of Earth's rising fury. The air was heavy with static, charged with an energy that sent tremors through their bodies. Vorik didn't pause to explain. He simply gestured to the sky, his voice sharp and clear. "Prepare yourselves. We're not alone." No sooner had the words left his lips than a deafening roar tore through the air. The students barely had time to react before a ship, a sleek, angular craft, dropped from the clouds above, descending at a blistering speed. It cut through the atmosphere like a blade, its engines cutting through the air with a sound that felt like a physical strike against their eardrums. "Incoming!" Arkin shouted, his voice tinged with panic. "They're here!" Vorik's eyes were locked on the descending ship, every muscle in his body coiled, prepared for what was coming. He had seen this before, enemy ships landing without warning, bringing destruction in their wake. But this was Earth's fight, not his, and he would ensure the aliens knew that. The ship slammed into the earth with a bone-jarring impact, sending shockwaves through the ground. The trees around them were knocked to the ground, their trunks splintering and cracking like dry branches. Dust and debris filled the air, stinging their eyes and making it hard to see. Before they could react, a second ship descended, its engines roaring as it skimmed just above the treetops. The students flinched at the blast of wind, their faces contorting as the pressure of the passing ship made the ground shake beneath them. Vorik barely flinched as the chaos unfolded. "Get to cover!" he barked, his voice cutting through the panic. "Now!" The students scrambled, their movements frantic. Arkin barked orders in a language Vorik didn't understand. But there was no time for strategy, only action. They dove behind a cluster of rocks, shielding themselves from the incoming fire. Vorik, however, remained standing. His eyes were locked on the alien ships, his mind already working through the possibilities. The enemy would come in force, but they had underestimated the terrain. They had underestimated Earth. The ground here was not forgiving, and neither was Vorik. The first blast from the enemy ship rang out, a sharp, searing sound that split the air, sending a shockwave through the landscape. The ground exploded in a burst of flames and debris, but Vorik didn't move. He simply tilted his head slightly, watching as the enemy ship struggled to maintain control of its descent. It wasn't designed for this kind of battle. Earth's weapons aren't just its ships, Vorik muttered to himself, his lips curling into a grim smile. Earth's true weapon is its unpredictability. The alien ships roared above them, their engines vibrating the air as they released another round of fire, aimed directly at the area where the students had taken cover. The ground around them erupted in fiery blasts, but Vorik stood his ground, unwavering. He knew where to strike, and he was already planning his move. "Now," he said, his voice a whisper against the chaos. "Strike." The black ships, dormant for centuries, were ready. They surged forward with a violence that was almost palpable, the once dormant engines now roaring with a newfound purpose. Vorik's hand pressed against the controls, sending the ships into motion. They tore across the battlefield, their sleek bodies cutting through the air with precision. The alien ships, caught in the surprise of Earth's technological awakening, struggled to gain any ground. The students, now catching onto the rhythm of the fight, moved with purpose. Karen and the others, though still shaken, had no choice but to follow the pace. The air was thick with the sound of explosions, the acrid scent of burning metal filling their nostrils as the conflict unfolded before them. Vorik's mind raced, calculating each move with surgical precision. The alien ships may have had more firepower, but they didn't have the terrain, and they didn't have the knowledge of the land that Earth had honed over millennia. Every movement, every blast from Earth's weapons was calculated, deliberate. Earth was a battlefield, a living thing, and Vorik knew that, even though the aliens had come for conquest, they had no idea what they had truly awakened. A sudden piercing scream broke through the cacophony of battle. Vorik's head snapped toward the sound, his heart sinking. Arkin, the leader of the alien students, was struggling against a massive wave of energy, his body contorting as if fighting an invisible force. The attack had hit him directly, throwing him off balance. Vorik didn't hesitate. He moved swiftly, his instincts honed from years of battle. "Get him to cover!" he shouted. The students moved to assist, but Vorik was already there, his hand firm on Arkin's shoulder, pulling him away from the barrage of fire that had nearly struck him down. "Focus!" Vorik barked as Arkin struggled to regain his footing. "This isn't over. Earth's lessons don't stop when you get hurt. Keep moving!" The battle raged on, the ground shaking beneath them, the sound of combat filling their ears. The alien students had learned quickly, but they had underestimated Earth's fury. They had no choice now but to adapt or perish. "Stay close," Vorik commanded, his eyes narrowing as he turned to face the heart of the storm. "This fight is just beginning." The sky above them cracked open with another explosion, and the earth roared in response. The storm was coming, and Vorik was ready to face it. The aliens had awoken a force they could not hope to control. The explosion had barely faded into the earth's groan when the ground beneath them trembled again, a low, guttural growl that made the trees shudder and the air feel thick with anticipation. The alien ships above were momentarily dazed, their engines sputtering under the stress of the relentless barrage. But Vorik wasn't interested in the ships. The real battle, the one he had been preparing for, was far from over. His eyes never left the horizon, where an enemy fleet still hung, waiting to strike. "Fall back!" Vorik shouted, his voice cutting through the haze of smoke and dust. His hand shot out, pointing toward a cluster of rocky outcrops just beyond the tree line. "Get to cover. We've bought ourselves a few minutes, but the real fight is coming." The alien students, shaken by the battle, scrambled to obey. Arkin's face was tight with uncertainty, his eyes flicking between the looming threat above and the strategic retreat that Vorik had called for. His chest rose and fell with heavy breaths, his military training failing to fully reconcile with the chaos around him. "We can't keep running," Arkin finally said, his voice hoarse, his words soaked with a mix of disbelief and defiance. "We're not just going to hide. We have weapons. We can fight back." Vorik turned, his eyes locking with Arkin's, the weight of centuries of Earth's survival echoing in his gaze. "Fighting won't win this battle, Arkin. You'll never defeat them with weapons alone. It's not about fighting. It's about understanding. Earth has something your empire doesn't, the ability to think when everything else falls apart." The words landed like a slap, and for a brief moment, Arkin's expression flickered with doubt. His fingers twitched, but he didn't respond. Instead, he motioned for his students to follow Vorik as they scrambled to the cover he'd pointed out. The hum of distant gunfire echoed, but it was faint now, replaced by the overwhelming silence that had taken over the forest floor. The tension between them, thick with both the violence of battle and the weight of an impending decision, hung in the air like smoke. Vorik watched them move, his mind already working. The battlefield had changed. Humanity's power was not in its weapons, but in its ability to endure, to outthink. And that was Earth's true weapon. Diplomacy, timing, and the cunning to turn a war into something unexpected. The ground shook again, but this time it wasn't from the incoming fire. It was a new kind of energy. A transmission crackled through the communicator Vorik carried at his side. He reached for it, his fingers brushing against the device with practiced ease. His voice was low, calculated as he responded. "Vorik," a voice on the other end said. It was crisp and urgent, a voice Vorik recognized instantly. "The alien fleet is coordinating their next strike. They've adjusted their formation, and they're preparing for a full-scale assault on the planet. You have less than an hour." Vorik's mind clicked into high gear. The plan he had devised was no longer about surviving. It was about turning the table, using Earth's greatest weapon in the most unexpected way. His lips curled into a small, grim smile. "Then it's time?" He turned to Arkin, whose face was etched with frustration and confusion. "What are you planning?" Arkin demanded, his voice taut with a mix of disbelief and suspicion. Vorik met his gaze head-on, unflinching. "We're not just going to win this battle with firepower," he said, his voice carrying a cold edge. "You've underestimated Earth from the start, and now you'll see what that truly means." He motioned for the students to follow, leading them down the narrow passage that wound through the dense foliage. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and broken branches, but the deeper they went, the quieter it became. The world felt suspended, as if time itself were holding its breath. The deeper they ventured, the more the weight of what was to come pressed on them. Earth had always been full of surprises, but Vorik had a secret. He was about to show them the last one. The group reached a small clearing, a strange stillness descending as they entered. The trees around them were taller here, the canopy thick with dark green leaves that blocked out the last rays of sunlight. The ground beneath their feet softened, but the air felt electric, charged with something unspoken. Vorik looked back, his gaze sharp. "This is where Earth's greatest power lies," he said, his voice calm but filled with intensity. "Not in weapons or ships, not in the chaos of battle, but in what you can control when everything seems to be lost, in diplomacy, and the ability to play a game the galaxy can't understand." A low growl of thunder rolled in the distance. Arkin glanced upward nervously, but Vorik remained focused. He opened a small panel in the ground, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside, an old communication system hummed to life as he flipped a series of switches. "You want to win this?" Vorik asked, his voice almost a whisper now. "Then you have to play by Earth's rules. We'll send a message." The students crowded around him, their expressions a mix of confusion and disbelief. Karen leaned forward. "What kind of message?" he asked, his voice barely above a murmur. Vorik's eyes met his, and for a moment there was something almost maternal in his gaze, as though he were speaking to them, as one might speak to a child learning a hard lesson. "A message that will change everything," he said, his voice a razor-sharp promise. He pressed a final button and the communication system powered up. A crackling voice came through the speakers, a language foreign to the students, but Vorik knew exactly what it was. "This is the fleet of Earth," he said aloud, though his words carried a weight far beyond his immediate surroundings. "We demand peace. Your empire has encroached upon our land long enough. We will not yield. We will not bow. We will negotiate, or you will leave." There was silence for a long moment. The wind seemed to hold its breath, the forest still, as though waiting for a response. Finally, the voice crackled again, distorted and harsh, but unmistakable. "You are outmatched. Surrender, and we may spare you." Vorik smiled, his eyes narrowing with quiet satisfaction. "No," he said, his voice firm and unyielding. "We will show you why you never should have underestimated Earth." And as the alien fleet hovered above, poised to strike, the students began to understand. The real battle wasn't one of weapons. It was one of willpower. And Earth's strength wasn't just in its weapons or ships. It was in its ability to outlast, to outthink, and to fight not just with force, but with strategy, with diplomacy. The message had been sent. Now, Earth would see just how much its words could change the course of war. The words Vorik had just spoken still hung in the air, reverberating in the tense silence that followed. "We demand peace." His voice echoed through the now still clearing, as if the trees themselves were listening, their leaves trembling in anticipation. The weight of his words settled over the group, a cold clarity spreading through the alien students. "Peace? You think the Empire will bow to your demands?" Arkin's voice, though steady, betrayed a flicker of doubt. His earlier bravado had melted away, replaced by something akin to fear. Earth was playing a game they hadn't prepared for, one that didn't follow the rules they knew so well. Vorik turned slowly to face him, his eyes unyielding. "You've underestimated Earth from the beginning," he said, his voice low and measured. "It's not just strength that will win this. It's strategy. And now you'll see what happens when you try to force a planet into submission. The alien students were tense, unsure whether to believe what was unfolding before them. It was as though they could feel the weight of the decision that had just been set in motion, the turning point of the battle. The alien fleet above, poised for a strike, hadn't yet made their move, but Earth's message had already reached them. The real fight now lay not in ships or weapons, but in the subtleties of negotiation, in the mind games that Vorik had been setting up all along. Vorik moved toward the rocky outcrop, his mind already working through the intricate steps of his plan. His fingers brushed over the cold stone, tracing the lines as he spoke again, this time to the students who gathered around him. This is not just about fighting them off. This is about making them realize something. That Earth is no longer the meek, silent planet they once thought it to be. They need to understand that we can change the course of this war with words, with knowledge. The students exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of skepticism and reluctant understanding. Karen, still struggling to adjust to this new reality, spoke up. "What exactly are we supposed to do? Send another message? Will they even listen?" Vorik's eyes flickered to the sky, where the shadows of the alien fleet still loomed. "Number. It's not just words anymore. It's timing, Karen. Earth knows when to act and when to stay silent, and now we're going to make them see how much they've miscalculated." He turned back to the group, gesturing toward the horizon where the alien fleet had taken position. His plan was unfolding, but it was more than just tactics. It was about control. Control of the narrative. Control of the decision-making process. Control of the peace that would come, not through defeat, but through careful manipulation of the power dynamics. "Their fleet will move in soon," Vorik said, his voice now sharpened with the focus of someone who had been in enough battles to know when to strike. "They're assuming we'll retreat, that we'll surrender, but we've set the stage for a different response, and when they think they have us cornered, we'll strike." Arkin, his earlier doubts now replaced with a growing sense of realization, nodded slowly. "You're playing their arrogance against them," he murmured, understanding clicking into place. "By staying silent, by seeming weak, we've made them complacent." Vorik smiled grimly. "Exactly. They think we'll cower, but what they don't realize is that Earth is never out of options, not when we've got a card to play." The students were quiet now, each of them grappling with the weight of what Vorik was suggesting. It was not a traditional battle. It was not about firepower or tactics. It was about patience, about letting the enemy make the first move. And when they did, Vorik would be waiting. He turned and gestured toward the edge of the clearing. "We'll wait for them to move first," he said. "Then we'll respond. The key is timing." The alien students seemed to shrink back as the first shots from the fleet began to rain down in the distance, the sounds of their cannons reverberating through the earth. The sky above seemed to split with each burst of fire, the air growing thick with the noise of the attack. Vorik's face was unreadable as he stood firm, the entire situation a test of control. "We don't react immediately," Vorik said, his voice unwavering despite the chaos building around them. "They expect us to panic. They expect us to break, but we won't. Not yet." Karen glanced nervously at the sky, his body tense, waiting for the inevitable. "How long can we hold out like this? How long before they overwhelm us?" Vorik's gaze was sharp, calculating. "As long as we need. They don't know it yet, but this battle is already over, and they won't even see it coming." There was a brief pause, a pregnant silence that stretched as the fire rained down, but Vorik didn't budge. He wasn't waiting for the fleet to arrive. He was waiting for the perfect moment, for the second they made a misstep. They were overconfident, underestimating Earth's resilience, and that would be their undoing. Without warning, Vorik's hand shot up, a single sharp motion. "Now!" At that signal, everything changed. The black ships, lying dormant just a few yards away, roared to life in a violent surge, their engines igniting with a force that seemed to split the very air around them. The ground shook as the massive machines, hidden from the enemy's sight, surged forward like beasts unleashed. The alien fleet above had made their mistake. underestimating the power of Earth's strategic patience. Arkan's eyes widened in shock. What? How? The first black ship tore through the air like an unstoppable force, its weapons firing with precision, carving paths of destruction through the alien fleet. The enemy ships, once poised for an overwhelming offensive, found themselves on the receiving end of a sudden and brutal counterattack. Vorex stood tall, his gaze unwavering as the ships moved into position. "This is where we end it," Vorex muttered under his breath. The plan had worked, just as he had known it would. The alien ships faltered, their formations breaking apart in confusion. They hadn't expected a counterattack of this scale, especially not from a planet they thought they had cornered. But Earth had never been about simple strategies. It was about knowing when to hold back and when to strike with everything you had. The battle unfolded in a blur, the distant rumble of weapons fire replaced by the sickening sound of metal clashing. The alien fleet scrambled, their once imposing force now reeling under the force of Earth's unexpected retaliation. The sky above had turned from its harsh gray to a turbulent black, the once imposing alien fleet now in disarray, scattered across the heavens like broken shards of a once mighty weapon. Earth's counterattack had come like a storm, swift and unstoppable, and now, as the dust of battle settled, there was only silence. The alien ships, unable to regroup, drifted helplessly in the vast expanse of space, their control systems crippled, and their commanders left with nothing but the bitter realization that they had underestimated humanity. Vorex stood on the outskirts of the clearing, the heat from the battle still radiating off his body, his expression as hard as the terrain beneath his boots. He knew what this moment meant. This wasn't just a victory in a single skirmish. It was a turning point. Earth had sent a message, not just to the aliens, but to the galaxy itself. A message that would resonate for centuries to come. Humanity had long been underestimated, dismissed as weak, as insignificant. But now, as the remnants of the alien fleet writhed in retreat, the truth had been revealed in the most powerful way possible. Earth was no longer the silent observer. The alien students stood behind him, their faces pale, their bodies trembling with the aftershock of the battle. They had seen Earth's might firsthand, and now they understood. The weapons, the technology, the sheer force of will. It wasn't the power of advanced machinery or superior firepower that had won this war. It was humanity's ability to endure, to survive, to adapt when the odds were stacked against them. "How did you do it?" Karen asked, his voice barely a whisper as he stepped forward. His eyes were wide with disbelief, his fingers still trembling from the shock of what they had just witnessed. How did we—" Vorex turned slowly to face him, his eyes dark with the weight of the truth. "You saw it with your own eyes," he said, his voice low and firm. "Earth doesn't just survive, it thrives. When you've lived on a planet like this, one that has fought through countless wars, one that has weathered extinction and rebuilt from nothing, you learn how to adapt. You learn how to rise again, even when you're brought to your knees. We didn't need your advanced fleets or your superior technology. All we needed was the will to fight and the courage to stand against the dark." Karen swallowed hard, his throat tight. "But the galaxy, the Empire, they'll come back. They won't let this stand. We've provoked them, and there's no going back." Vorex's gaze softened, but there was no fear in his eyes. "Let them come," he said, his voice steady and unshaken. "They have no idea what they're up against. Earth has been quiet, but we've always been watching, and we've been waiting. We won't run, not anymore. We stand as a force to be reckoned with, and no empire, no fleet, will make us bend to their will." The students exchanged uncertain glances, but there was something different now in their eyes, a spark of understanding, perhaps even admiration, for the planet they had so recklessly assumed was weak. Arkan, the leader of the students, stepped forward, his expression now one of solemn respect. He had been the most vocal in his doubts, the one most convinced of Earth's fragility. But now, after witnessing the raw power of this planet, he had no choice but to acknowledge its strength. "Earth has shown us its true face," Arkan said quietly. his voice carrying an edge of reverence. "I thought you were nothing more than relics of a bygone era. But now I see what you really are." Vorek nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the vast expanse of space where the last remnants of the alien fleet drifted away. "You see now," he said, his words deliberate and heavy, "we are the children of this earth. We fought to survive, and now we fight to thrive. You thought we were weak because we didn't lash out. You thought we were insignificant because we stayed silent. But silence is strength, it's patience, and it's understanding when to strike." There was a long pause, the sound of distant explosions and the crackling of dying ships, the only noise that filled the silence. The students stood still, their minds racing as the reality of their defeat settled in. The fight was over, but the truth had only just begun to sink in. Earth had not only withstood their attack, it had turned it into a victory. And in that victory, humanity had shown them what it meant to be underestimated. Vorek looked up at the sky, his face illuminated by the faint glow of the retreating fleet. "They'll never see us as we truly are. They'll always think of us as the underdogs, and that's the way we like it." His voice dropped to a whisper, the weight of the words heavy in the stillness. "Because it's when they think we're weak that we strike. It's when they don't see us coming that we rise." The alien students, still processing the truth of what had unfolded, stood frozen in place. But Vorek, ever the strategist, turned his attention back to the present. "It's not over yet. There are more decisions to make, and Earth's place in the galaxy is just beginning. We've sent a message, but now we must prepare. The future won't come to us. We'll have to shape it ourselves." As he spoke, the students began to understand. This was not the end. This was the beginning of something far greater. Earth had not simply defended itself. It had shown the galaxy that it would not be dominated, that no matter how small, no matter how long overlooked, humanity was a force to be reckoned with. "We're not just fighting for survival anymore," Vorek continued, his voice steady, resolute. "We're fighting for our place in the galaxy, and no one can take that from us." The alien students were silent, their gazes fixed on Vorek as the weight of his words settled over them like a blanket. It was as if they had been blind, and now, for the first time, they were seeing clearly. Earth was not the weak, forgotten world they had assumed it to be. Earth was alive, fierce, and capable of unimaginable strength. As the last of the enemy fleet vanished into the distance, Earth's message was clear. Its fight was far from over. Humanity had no intention of being anyone's pawn. The galaxy would come to know that, just as it had forgotten them, it would never forget Earth again. And as Vorek stood there, looking out at the vast, star-filled sky, he knew one thing for sure. Earth had risen, and the galaxy would never look at them the same way again. "Let them come," he said, his voice filled with quiet authority. "We've only just begun.